They tell you that 20 years in a maximum security facility changes a man. They're wrong. It doesn't change you. It erases you. It strips away the soft parts of your soul until all that is left is concrete and survival. I was Marcus, inmate number 8472. My hands were weapons. My eyes were always scanning for the next threat, and my heart stopped beating a long time ago. The yard was a place of predatory math. You calculate weakness. You never show a sliver of mercy. But then came the rainstorm of October 4th. The yard flooded, the sirens blared, and we were being herded back to the blocks. That's when I heard a sound that didn't belong in a place built for monsters. A pathetic, raspy squeak coming from beneath a discarded sheet of rusted metal. Before that day, my world was a meticulously constructed fortress of violence and silence. Cell Block D was a concrete tomb where men went to forget they were human. I hadn't touched another living thing with kindness in 22 years. My routine was waking up to the harsh metallic clang at the doors, eating gray food from a plastic tray, and lifting rusted iron until my muscles screamed loud enough to drown out my memories. I was a ghost haunting a 6x9 cage. I had no visitors, no letters, no hope. I had perfectly adapted to the dark, becoming a shadow among other shadows, waiting for the clock to simply run out on my miserable existence. I broke the line. The guards yelled. Warning shots were threatened. But for the first time in 2 decades, I didn't care. I lifted the rusted metal, expecting to find a dying rat. Instead, looking up at me with terrified, vibrant green eyes was a creature smaller than my fist, a shivering, soaking wet orange tabby kitten. In a world of absolute concrete and cruelty, a fragile, tiny heartbeat had just breached the walls. He was nothing but wet fur and protruding ribs. The sirens were blaring, the dogs were barking, but everything went dead silent in my head. I looked at this tiny, broken thing, and for a split second, I saw my own ruined reflection. Survival instinct is a funny thing. I didn't think, I just reacted. I scooped him up, shoved him deep inside my oversized denim jacket, and marched back to the cell block, praying the guards wouldn't pat me down. Once the steel door slammed shut for the lockdown, I pulled him out. He was freezing, his tiny body vibrating with terror. I took my only clean undershirt, the one I saved for inspections, and wrapped him in it. I soaked a piece of my dried bread in a little puddle of water from my cup and pushed it toward his face. He sniffed it, looked up at my scarred face, and took a microscopic bite. The deal was struck in the shadows. Sleep in maximum security isn't rest. It's just a different kind of torture. The nightmares always take me back to the night I threw my life away. The yelling, the sirens, the unforgivable mistake. I woke up gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs, cold sweat stinging my eyes. The cell was pitch black. But then, I felt a vibration, a low, rhythmic humming sound. Peanut had crawled out of the shirt and was sitting squarely on my chest, right over my racing heart. He was purring, the sound so pure, so completely devoid of malice, it felt like an alien frequency. He didn't care what I had done 20 years ago. He just knew I was scared in the dark.
Keeping a cat hidden in a 6x9 cell required military precision. Peanut learned the routine faster than most inmates. When the guard's heavy boots echoed down the tier for count, he knew to dive under my mattress and stay perfectly silent. But he wasn't just a parasite. He pulled his weight. The cell block was infested with mice, bold little thieves that stole our meager rations. Peanut, despite his size, was a born predator. I'd wake up to find a dead mouse neatly placed next to my steel toilet. He was providing for me. We were two inmates sharing a cage, operating outside the warden's rules, relying entirely on each other to survive the gray monotony.
It happened on a Tuesday, my mother's birthday. She died 10 years into my sentence, and I never got to say goodbye. The grief hit me like a physical blow, sudden and paralyzing. I sat on the cold floor, my back against the steel door, and buried my face in my hands. The armor cracked. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt a rough, tiny tongue scraping against my knuckle. Peanut was standing on his hind legs, pawing at my hands, trying to reach my face. He let out a distressed, high-pitched meow. I picked him up, pressed my face into his orange fur, and let the dam break. A hardened killer, weeping over a stray kitten.
You can't keep a secret forever in a place where privacy doesn't exist. Big Sal, a terrifying enforcer serving life without parole, noticed me smuggling milk cartons from the mess hall. He cornered me in the showers. I braced for a fight, my fists clenching. But Sal just pointed a massive scarred finger at my jacket pocket. Peanut poked his little orange head out, letting out a tiny squeak. Sal, a man who had broken bones with a smile, completely froze. His eyes widened. He reached out a trembling hand and gently scratched the kitten behind the ears. Word spread. Soon, the most dangerous men in the state were slipping me pieces of tuna and smuggled string. Peanut didn't just soften me, he disarmed an entire cell block. For a few brief hours every evening before lights out, the cell didn't feel like a cage, it felt like a room. I made a toy out of rolled-up toilet paper and a thread pulled from my blanket. I would drag it across the cold concrete, and Peanut would stalk it with the intensity of a jungle cat. I found myself laughing, a real, genuine laugh that echoed off the steel walls. I talked to him. I told him about the ocean, about the smell of fresh-cut grass, about all the things I had thrown away. He would sit and listen, his ears twitching, never judging, never leaving. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just existing, I was caring for something.
But the prison ecosystem is built on cruelty, and happiness is contraband. Officer Miller was a guard who enjoyed the power a little too much. He noticed the shift in the block. He noticed the tuna missing from the kitchen. He started conducting random, aggressive cell tosses, tearing up mattresses, smashing personal items. The anxiety was a physical weight on my chest. Every time his boots echoed down the tier, my blood turned to ice. I trained Peanut to hide inside a hollowed-out section of the air vent, but I knew it was only a matter of time. You can't hide a living, breathing soul in a place designed to crush him. The walls were closing in.
The shakedown happened at midnight. Miller stormed into my cell, his flashlight cutting through the dark like a blade. He didn't even check the bed. He went straight for the vent. He had been tipped off. He pulled the metal grate away, and there was Peanut, frozen in the harsh light. Miller reached in with a cruel smile, grabbing the kitten roughly by the scruff. Peanut screamed. That sound snapped the last thread of my restraint. I knew the penalty. I knew it meant solitary, maybe worse, but I didn't care. I launched myself across the cell, hitting the guard with the force of 20 years of pent-up rage, wrapping my arms around him just enough to knock him off balance and pry his hand open.
The backup arrived in seconds. Batons, pepper spray, boots. They beat me until the concrete tasted like copper, then dragged me by my ankles down to the hole. Solitary confinement. No light, no sound, just a cold steel box. My ribs were broken, my eyes swollen shut, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in my chest. I didn't know what happened to Peanut. Did Miller crush him? Did they throw him back into the freezing yard? I sat in the absolute darkness, rocking back and forth, praying for the first time in my life, not for my own soul, but for the tiny, fragile life I had failed to protect. I was back to being a ghost, but this time it hurt.
I spent 30 days in the hole. 30 days of absolute silence. When the steel door finally opened, the light blinded me. 2 guards escorted me back to D Block. I expected the usual grim silence, the hollow stares of defeated men. But as I walked down the tier, something impossible happened. The inmates weren't quiet. They were standing at the bars of their cells, not yelling, not rioting, just standing. And as I passed, Big Sal tapped his knuckles against the steel bars, twice. Then the next cell did it. Tap, tap. A rhythmic, rolling wave of respect echoing through the concrete tomb. They weren't honoring a gang leader. They were honoring the man who took a beating for a kitten.
I walked into my cell expecting it to be empty, expecting the silence to finally crush me. I sat on the bunk, staring at the blank wall, waiting for the reality to set in. Then the heavy door clanged open again. It wasn't Miller. It was an older guard, a man nearing retirement who rarely spoke. He stood in the doorway, looked left and right down the corridor, and then unzipped his heavy winter coat. He reached inside and pulled out a small, slightly fatter, completely unharmed orange tabby. He set Peanut on the floor, gave me a single, silent nod, and closed the door. Peanut ran to my boots, purring like a chainsaw. He survived. We survived.
That was 5 years ago. I did my time, but I didn't leave as the man I was when I walked in. When the massive steel gates finally opened to the outside world, I walked out with a cardboard box full of legal papers and a large, confident orange cat sitting proudly on my shoulder. I got a job as a mechanic. I have an apartment with a window that lets the sun in. Peanut sleeps at the foot of my bed every night. People look at my scars, my tattoos, and they see a criminal. But Peanut looks at me and sees the man who lifted the rusted metal. He taught me that no matter how deep the darkness goes, love is the only thing strong enough to break the concrete.